Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, before I say anything else, I must say what is on everyone's mind, or I hope is on every American's mind. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you guys are doing something productive, either reading about the foundations of the American experiment or enjoying and cherishing your freedom and the culinary traditions of Americans by barbecuing or just being with your family. I hope that regardless of your perspective in America, regardless of your political disposition, I hope you are cherishing the shared foundation and heritage that Americans certainly did inherit, not only from the founders and what they did on this sacred day, but from the powers of the earth, as Jefferson so delicately said. He was calling up in the Declaration of Independence. So, my friends, when I think of the 4th of July, throughout the years, I've had a lot of different thoughts. I used to think the 4th of July was simply a sort of a time, as John Adams' wife said, of pomp and celebration. But in my perspective, I took her sentence to say this, that didn't always adhere and address the ills that the country was facing in that particular moment, and that sort of ignorance, that sort of not addressing it was destructive. But then I began to realize the 4th of July, truly realized, is not about any man. It's not about any institution. It's not about any individuals. The 4th of July is profoundly about the ideas, the precepts upon which this country is predicated on. And a lot of us would say, well, it's freedom. Well, it's a little bit more than freedom. And when I think of the ideas that America is predicated upon, and this brings me to my thesis, I think that Independence Day today is perhaps proof that America is eternally a benevolent nation. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is so what is a tree is typically made out of organic material, right? And the organic material isn't all the tree is, but the organic material constitutes what the tree is. And the tree's organic material is rooted into the earth, and it derives nutrients from the earth. Think of the structure of the American government as the organic material of a tree. And think of the American government, or the structure of America in general, as not simply being a result of what it's composed out of, and that is a respect for the sovereignty of individuals, a respect for certain inalienable rights, a respect for freedom of conscience, a respect for dissent and consent. But regardless of those archetypal themes which percolate throughout the body of the American structure, think of it also largely as a vessel for a certain thing. A tree is a vessel for so many ecosystems to flourish. A tree is a vessel for the earth to remain green and rich in its nutrients and its color. A tree is a vessel for so much, but it's only a vessel because of that, because of what it's made out of. You see where I'm going? America is only a vessel for freedom because of what the structure of its government is made out of. And there's an observation that one of my favorite political philosophers, Isabel Patterson, made. She said in The God of the Machine that the reason why so many empires have failed throughout the history of the world is because they neglected to understand the practical underpinnings of what life entailed. They neglected to understand the principle of human freedom, which is why so many great empires, whether it was Carthage, Rome, whether it was the Greek city-states, had failed because they neglected to understand the world. And in a sea of countries that were predicated upon falsehoods, predicated upon illusions of grandeur, illusions of divinity in man, and bound up through the monarchy, in a world of that, the American colonists stuck with the concrete. They forgot the abstractions and stuck with the concrete. They understood that their freedom was not a matter of simply rationalizing it in the abstract realm as the ancient Greeks may have rationalized political concepts. They understood that their freedom was a matter of observation. And these observations were not made by man. They were in the world already. The ideas of America, my friends, aren't good because they sound good. They're good because they're natural truths. The idea of property, for example, is one of the cornerstone ideas of our society right now, and it is one of the foundational ideas of America. The idea of property is that every man is self-owning. Now, there's sort of two distinctions in this idea. If you're John Locke, you believe that God owns you, which is why you cannot alienate your rights. But there's still, even in Locke's philosophy, there's still a sort of element of self-ownership. If you're the rest of the natural law tradition, particularly if you're Hugo Grotius, one of the people who actually inspired Jefferson and inspired the founders to put some of the things in their documents, then you believe that you are indeed self-owning because you have property. And both beliefs in the tradition that we get our understanding from, property is still essential. The idea of property is that you have sovereignty over yourself, and no one can violate that sovereignty. And this sovereignty over yourself is a cornerstone of your being. This sovereignty over yourself is a prerequisite for your flourishing, your happiness as a human being. And this is not because of society, but this is because if I don't own myself, if I can't make a claim to my own happiness and self-love, then there's absolutely nothing for me, this vessel, to do in this world without sputtering out of control. If a tree's nature was dictated by its surroundings, solely by its surroundings, then the nature of a tree would be always in flux and wouldn't be able to understand it. There'd be no consistency. And in my opinion, if there's no consistency, there's no core functions. But because the tree's nature is fixed, it's dynamic, but it's still fixed. There's a certain core about it. The tree can remain rooted. And because the American idea is fixed, and it's fixed into our human nature, we can remain consistent and rooted. And this is a sentiment reflected by John Dickinson, one of the most forgotten American founders, but he actually helped draft the few declarations that we sent towards the king before we declared independence. And Dickinson said this. He said, "Let these truths be indelibly impressed on our minds, that we cannot be happy without being free, that we cannot be free without being secure in our property, and that we cannot be secure in our property if, without our consent, others may, as by right, take it away, that taxes imposed on us by Parliament do thus take it away." My friends, do you understand what that means? America is built upon internal truths. America is predicated upon what I can actually observe. And Dickinson also said this. He said, "Experience must be our only guide. Reason may mislead us." Because we understand that America is not an advent of an abstraction. America is evidence of the material world being manifest in a way that is proper to its functions and processes. And this idea is what allowed America to persist for so long, my friends. This idea is what allowed the westward expansion to happen. This idea is what allowed the nation to stay together after the War of 1812 when the White House was burning and so many people were demoralized. This idea is what allowed us to persist through the Civil War. This idea is what allowed America to persist through the Klan, going into the South and killing a lot of black people and terrorizing them. This idea is what allowed us to persist through World War II. This idea is what allowed us to persist through civil rights. This idea that we are self-owning and we are self-contained and there is some sort of outside source of our existence, which also speaks to the value of the human being. This is the idea of which America is predicated upon. Now, many of us may say, some may say, well, the idea of America has never become the reality of America. And therefore, this talk of ideas and divorcing ideas from institutions is flawed. And I would say this to that. The idea of America and the actual status of America and its material condition are one and the same. Yes, the idea of America is not some abstraction that sits above in the heavens that we can only think of and we can think this is cool. No. The idea of America is an idea that is confirmed by what we can see in nature. We can see that if a man owns himself, that if a man has possession over his faculties, he can use his freedom of consciousness to make decisions that either are rational or not rational, but most of the time when you're in a civil context are indeed rational. And even outside a civil context are primed towards its survival, and therefore rationality picks in. We can observe that. We can observe that there are certain powers within our being, such as the power of reason, that allows us to make civilizational codes, that allows us to form bonds together, that allows us to see the world in a higher light than the animals can, as Aristotle and many of the other great philosophers said in their works. We can see these things. They are not abstract. And the fact, however, that these things may be concealed at a certain point in history is not evidence of their non-existence. The fact that the natural truth of human freedom has not been seen throughout American history is not evidence of its existence working every day. The slaves in the American South are actually evidence of the natural truth coming to life because they first had to use their reason to sing those spirituals to liberate themselves from those epistemic chains that were put upon them by the slave masters. And then after that, they were able to break their material chains because there is a connection, an interconnection, a sort of merging, a hybridization of the conceptual and the physical. They both exist in the same space. So America the idea and America the nation is exactly the same thing, even if one is more pronounced than the other. So that when we talk about America as an idea that's perfecting itself, we don't mean that America is some abstract notion. No, we mean America is alive right now, whether it's in the presence of Jim Crow, slavery, or whatever pain we have to work on. We mean that America is alive right now, and like all living things. Because the idea of America, again, back to the organic matter, is predicated upon living things, what we can see in nature, what we can see in human beings. Like all living things, we have growing pains. But like all living things, America has the potential, not just the potential, the actuality, as evidenced by its existence, as evidenced by its trials that it's gone through, to usurp those pains and go forward. America is not this whole collective mass that we can measure easily, my friends. Let me leave you with this. America is the product of the determination and incandescent energy burned by so many individuals who recognized their natural truths and were willing to die for them, and they were willing to fight for them. America is you and me. Don't understand America as this general idea. Understand America as the physical, concrete reality that is realized and actualized by all of us exercising our natural freedom in a manner that is conducive both to our happiness and the perpetuation of a liberty for posterity. Because that's really what matters. Making sure that other people in the next generation understand that they, too, are endowed with certain truths. They, too, can call upon the powers of the earth. And they, too, my friends, can receive the blessings of liberty if they remember that they have it. And no one can take that liberty from them, but people most certainly can convince them that doesn't exist. In the face of all the foes that America faces right now, we have to understand that America is not contingent upon one or two actions or a history of actions. America is contingent upon an empirical realization of the greatness of human beings and our immense potential to do better when we are free. When we recognize our freedom. So happy birthday, America. America, for these reasons, is an eternally benevolent country, and it will always be an eternally benevolent country, regardless of what happens, so long as we remember our freedom. I love you guys. If you want to support me, patreon.com/officialcwatson or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com, or locals, christianwatson.locals.com, or Discord, which is linked down below. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.